Ben Stanley, can you hear us? And the and then there's anyone else on?
I can hear you, Commissioner.
Okay. Robert Moore.
Mm-hmm.
Is Robert Moore going to be participating with us on this, Dave? Is Robert Moore going to be participating?
Just by phone.
Okay.
On as well.
Okay, good. Then are we ready to get started, Alice? Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's commission meeting. And as we do historically, we like to begin with a prayer reading of thought followed by a pledge of allegiance. Do we have a volunteer from the public to provide the prayer reading or thought? Anyone to provide the pledge of allegiance? You will? She will she? The pledge? And anyone to provide the prayer reading or thought, I'll ask that one more time. And we'll bring that up here. I'll do it. Commissioner Lee?
Our Heavenly Father, we are thankful to be able to gather peaceably here today. We're thankful for the weather that Thou hast given to us and for the many opportunities that we do enjoy for our good friends and family and those that are around us and our neighbors. We're thankful for their goodness and we're thankful for them in our lives. We're thankful, Father, for a government that looks after the people. We're thankful for those who support it, defend it, either militarily or with police force, and those who are supporting it and defending it on their own ways. We pray as we go through our agenda today that we can be mindful of the people and mindful of their plight. And we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, in the past, our agenda had a consent title item. The system is being updated and that part did not appear. But we'll go ahead and do a consent. We'll review the regular agenda and consider which ones we will approve as consent items, and then we'll go back from there. So regular agenda items 1 through 10, are there any items that either of you would like to see held for discussion?
We could hold number 6.
6.
And then also for me, if it's possible, if we could table number 8.
Table 8 till after close. Any others? Then items 11 through 22.
I think we're going to strike number 14.
Okay. Strike number 14.
And I think it was strike number 20, right?
Okay.
And then I would like to at least discuss item number 21.
Okay. And we'll need to have a discussion on 22. That was too fast. Alice, would you go ahead and review? Are there
When we close
any
meetings.
closed items number? I think we have one for number
23 and 26. We could hold.
23 and 26. And we're good to strike 24 and 25 then. Any others?
So, Mr. Chair, do you want me to set those closed meetings?
Please.
So to leave on regular, or to leave on our consent agenda that we have approved and set the date, time, and location as stated number 23 and 26.
Okay,
Leave on consent.
and we'll leave those on consent, okay? I think that's it. Alice, would you review what?
You bet. Okay, I have us holding regular agenda items number 6. We're going to table item number 8, striking 14, striking 20, holding 21 and 22. Then for closed meetings, we'll be holding agenda items number 23 and 26, and striking on consent 24 and 25.
Okay, that's what I got. Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda number 6.
Yes, so with agenda item number 6, this is to modify our meetings for this year. Originally, we mistakenly noticed or listed October the 2nd. That needs to be changed to October the 5th, if that's okay, so that it falls in line. And then we made an assumption that our annual UAC conference was going to be on a certain date, and it's not. They changed it. And so because they changed it, that we should probably cancel the November 16th meeting, which is over that week, where we'll be at conference. That leaves us with a little bit of dilemma in the way of commission meetings, because we've typically tried to not have them go longer than, a week, and in that case, it would be multiple weeks before we had a commission meeting. So we probably should consider a meeting on either November the 21st or the 22nd. We on November the 22nd, we would have to be done because we're doing canvassing because of everything being pushed back. So November the 22nd would be canvassing at 3 o'clock. If we wanted to squeeze a meeting in there at 2, from 2 to 3, or we do a Monday meeting. I mean, we're going to be here anyway. I mean, Thanksgiving is right there at that time, but I think that we should at least consider either doing it on Monday the 21st at, say, 12 o'clock or 2 or whatever to be consistent, or we'd look at this 22nd since we're going to be here already for canvassing if we think we can get it done within an hour.
I think we should shoot to get it done within an hour. I think if we're going to be here for canvassing anyway, and then we just put only critical items on the agenda that day,
Yeah.
just so that any cleanup items,
Okay.
anything else that's really important, we could handle the following week, the first week of December, I think.
Yeah. How about, I don't recall, what's November 7th look like? Or excuse me, not 7th, the November 9th, the following Wednesday.
I think we're going to do one then.
We need to schedule that. I think that's on the attachment.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
So it shows a meeting on,
I see November 2nd, 16th, and 30th.
So we'd need to have one on the 9th.
right, so we would need to have one on the 9th and then not on the 16th.
Okay, because you were mentioning November the 21st. I want to make sure which of the 2 days is best.
Yeah. So if we went with the 22nd at 2 o'clock, then we'd have 1 hour to make sure and catch. And that way we're not going long periods of time without having a commission meeting in between.
Right, and then we just focus on critical items in that meeting since it's only an hour.
Yep.
I think that's a good alternative to going 2 weeks without a meeting.
Yes. So
So I can make a motion to that effect if you'd like.
please go ahead, do that, yes.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the resolution as stated on number 6. And I believe, check to make sure that I'm getting this correct, and I believe that it's already changing the meeting to the October 5th with that adoption of that on the agenda.
Yes,
And
there.
that, and that we schedule another meeting for November 9th and cancel the meeting of November 16th, and then also add another meeting November 22nd at 2 p.m.
Both November 9th and 22nd, 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Okay. And whether it's an hour or 2 hours, we can decide at that point.
Well, the second hour will be the canvassing for the election.
Yes. Okay. Is there a second on that motion?
Yep, I will second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This passes 3-0. Okay. And then that brings us down to 21, but I think 22 is also part of that discussion.
Okay.
Robert, you're jumping ahead of me, please. Could you are you able to speak to both of these agenda items?
Sure. Robert Baxter, Purchasing Manager. First, forgive me, I haven't quite recovered my voice after the Rose Bowl. There's 3 very good quarters, but
That's true. Oh, boy. Gallery out there.
so I guess we should address maybe address first, I think it's 22, about adding the new exemption. I know originally we were looking at putting that in Part 3, and we decided to put it in Part 5. This was to allow some discretion with with, in particular, entertainment and attractions and types of things. It was brought up when we were talking about the fair, but it doesn't necessarily only apply to the fair, but any type of entertainment attractions that the county is sponsoring. That these types of events don't really lend themselves well to a competitive process. So we wanted to have the yes, that might help. Thank you. Have the discretion to exempt them from competitive bids. So that's what that part is about. Was there anything in particular you wanted to discuss on that?
Was there any conflicts on financing any of these bids? I believe we have set a gross amount that the county will be willing to put toward the fair. That's one limitation. The other one would be the $2,500 threshold before an RFP needs to go out, and a $5,000. Could you compare this maybe to, or at least address that is it reflected in this Part B, Agenda 22?
Well, this part, it would exempt from competitive bids for items that would ordinarily require them. Now, 2,500, that's the threshold that would require just to get competitive quotes. To require an RFP is 50,000. That's the threshold for that. So between 2,500 and 50,000, you'd ordinarily have to go out and get 3 or 4 competitive quotes. And under this would allow us to exempt that from that requirement, as well as the RFP requirement. It would fall among a list of 7 other possible exemptions, like care of inmates and other categories that are also qualify for an exemption under that part.
Okay.
Did you want me to go into 21?
Yes, let's compare and contrast a little bit.
I have a few issues with the proposal in 21. When we look at those lists of exemptions, or I call them possible exemptions, because they're not automatic. They still require the approval of the purchasing manager. But there's a couple different types on there. Some of them are just to allow us to avail ourselves of state contracts without having to put them at a competitive bid. They've already gone through a competitive process. So that's what a couple of those are about. A couple of them are to fall in line with state statute, in particular care of inmates, election equipment. Those come from state statute, and my understanding is the intent of that is to allow us that same discretion that the state allows state entities for us to be able to exempt those unique purchases from competitive bidding. Now, I would note also that, in particular, on the one that has to do with what's in the best interest of the county, that's left up to my discretion. Those are also not automatic. It's not just a yes or a no. I need to do a letter of determination. There needs to be a justification, and it's documented. So that's the process as it is now. I want to add as well that this process does not cut out the commission from the process. Once that determination is made and a contract is drafted, it then comes to the commission for you to approve or to reject. So if there were some reason why you disagreed with my judgment on this, you'd have the opportunity to reject it at that point. I believe I was hired to make these sorts of professional judgments. I like to think I do a good job of it, and I think that that the process as it is a good process. I think to move to requiring commission approval up front, I think is a move in the wrong direction. I think we should be moving towards more efficiency and less bureaucracy rather than more. I know adding bureaucracy comes with a cost. We have lost vendors. If you ask Public Works or Sheriff's Office, they can tell you we have lost vendors because as an entity we are sometimes too slow because of if we hold up payments or we take too long. If we're talking about a low bidder, often they're working on a low margin. And if we're too bureaucratic or too slow, then they just don't want to do business with us. And it has happened. We've lost some good vendors because we were just too slow. What we have now is consistent with other government entities. I've checked a couple of them in the state, and it's consistent with how other government entities are doing theirs as well. I'd also note that discretion is not used frequently. In the last couple of years, it's maybe a dozen times a year. Looking at the last year, there were about $200,000 worth of expenses that fell under this category, and out of a $174 million budget, that's a pretty small percentage. So I don't think it's an issue that needs correction. I think, as I say, I think we should be looking for ways to streamline and create efficiencies rather than create additional layers of bureaucracy, requiring approval from the commission up front and then again from the commission on the back end.
Okay, on number 21, I wanted to have this conversation more than anything else. When this first came up, I wasn't quite settled on it. And now it's interesting to say we want to keep it the same because we're actually looking at changing it. So the process is not the same. It's actually being amended or changed, possibly. And so I was a little bit concerned with the original, which was 20, but now it's 22. And so I went back and looked at what our ordinance, because that's usually how I do it. Instead of just looking at it as one little line item, I tried to look at the whole thing and see what's going on to be consistent all the way across the whole gamut of it. And you're right, there's a lot in there. There's like 8 or 9 or 10 different parts of exemption, and most of them that are in there I think are pretty benign. When we talk about jail inmate stuff or contracts that have already went through competitive processes, and for the record or for whatever statement in there, I really think the competitive process is something that we should always be looking for. And we should these exemptions, like you duly noted, should be really far and in between, few and far and in between. They should not be. There should be a competitive process out there. I also have been, since I've been here, there have been times when, and I don't even know how the process went, but there was lots of people who were concerned about how contracts came about, and they were concerned that because contracts happened, that there was some sort of favoritisms. And right or wrong, I don't know, but there's been some accusations on that side. So with that in mind, I looked down through every single one of them, and I thought, okay, if we're moving in this direction on the entertainment side, countywide, not just for the fair or anything of that nature, it started that way, but it's countywide, then we should probably look at every single one. And that's the reason why I want to have this conversation. I truly believe that what's in the best interests of the county typically has lied in our legislative body, where we have conversations like this that are recorded, that are there, and it makes sense to me that we can have public input if we're determining this is in the best interest of the county. And it was written in a way, working with Dave on this, it was written in a way that there's an and in there. So there would be an and from our purchasing manager and the commission. So if the purchasing manager said, you know what, this does not look like it falls underneath that category, the commission doesn't just pass it through. There's an and that was placed in there. More eyes on it. I get the efficiency basis, but I think that we can eliminate the efficiency basis with preparation before. If we do it, if we're talking about the fair, hopefully we're talking about, months and months and months beforehand. It's not the immediate, because there have been times in which we have come up against a deadline and it's like, okay, are we going to have mission failure, or are we going to kind of subvert and go around our procurement process? And that's where a decision has to be made, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but we've done that. And I think we can alleviate a lot of that with a little bit knowledge beforehand. So the three that are on there, the one with the one that we're talking about with the entertainment, primarily this was started with the fair. And in looking at that, I get it that you're looking at it, and that's what we hired you to do. And mine is not taking that away from you. It's saying, yes, we want your recommendation in there still. But it is adding another layer for all three commissioners to be involved in that process after the 2,500 isn't in place. And that there's not just a one look or a two look at that. There's the commission, and it's a public forum. The second one, which I talked about, was in the best interest. I think those are policy decisions, and those policy decisions, if we decide that you can do that, but in the best interest of the county means what? It can be documented and saying this is what it is, but overall, I truly think that the commission needs to have a voice into that, besides just at the end of the game when the contract comes up and the clock is ticking like crazy. Maybe we could beforehand say, in the best interests of the county, let's proceed and go forward with this, because it makes sense for whatever reason the best interest is. And then we go through the negotiating process and get everything fine-lined in with the contract and nailed down through our processes. The last one is the elections. And in the elections ones, I went back and forth. I fully realized that the state has theirs, and they, that's how they do theirs. It's not that we can't do ours different. It's just that we've kind of adopted that. And a lot of the concern that I have will be alleviated after this year when the clerk and auditor's office is separate. But as it is right now, we've got the purchasing manager who directly reports to the clerk, who would be making that sort of question, on what it is. And I think just on an abundance of transparency, in a world that we're in right now, when it comes to elections on a national level, where we have so much controversy, I think transparency-wise, it would just show if we were going down through a process like that, that there's more eyes in it. I'm not trying to make any accusations to it. I'm just looking on a transparency basis. I think it gives us a better opportunity for this year, because next year will be different.
So I
And
think
get
you
that.
misunderstand the section there. That section there doesn't give purview of election purchasing to the purchasing agent. It gives it to the elected official that the people elected, the county clerk. So separation of the clerk and auditor's office wouldn't affect that one bit, because when it comes to that provision in the exception to the purchasing agreement, it's not the purview of the purchasing manager. That is left up to the clerk and the election officials, which would be like the elections director.
Well, and that's an interest to me. So why is it written into our ordinance then?
Because they have purview, because the way our ordinance is
That's
written,
purview.
the clerk and the election director, because the way our purchasing policy is written, you need to go through and get bids, and you need to go with the low cost bidder. But I don't think a single person would agree that in elections we should go with the low cost bidder. I think we should go with the best option for our county, because sometimes the low cost bidder is also the low security bidder. Right? And so the reason there's an exception in there to the process is because elections aren't required to go with the low-cost bidder, because we want to go with the most secure and the best option. It's not actually the purview. So it's an exception to the process, but not under the purchasing manager. It's under the election professionals who have the ability to go through and evaluate that on more than just price.
I mean, so Dave, do you see that? Do you see that the same in looking down through our ordinance on there?
Well, my understanding, this would be an exception, but it's just an exception to the competitive bid process for these
Correct.
specified election materials.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So it's an exception
So-
to the bid process.
Correct, but it's still, that exception has to be qualified through the purchasing manager currently.
Right, and all they're qualifying is, this is an election purchase.
Well, if the purchasing manager saw some other reason or some other issue, the purchasing manager might say, well, I hear your argument, but you need to consider these other issues. This exception shouldn't be granted without further review.
Can you give me an example?
Oh, no, I mean,
And the
I could
exception
make
is
one
for
up.
election supplies and election equipment. So if we're purchasing election supplies and election equipment, and then he says, yes, this is for the election.
well, the exception still requires the purchasing manager review.
Right, to verify that it's for elections.
But if the purchasing manager says, well, you have shown me no reason at all why this one product that costs twice as much is any better than the one that costs half as much. So the purchasing manager could say, hold on here, we need more information here.
Right, and that's currently in the code.
Well, that's my understanding, is because that's not a change.
Right, so I'm not
It's
understanding why we
identified.
need anything more than what's currently in the code, is what I'm saying.
Well,
Well, the only change that's proposed with regard to the elections would be that the purchasing manager looks at it and doesn't see an issue. And the commissioners also look at it and say, yeah, we don't see an issue here either. That would be, because the only amendment is to have that two-step review instead of just the purchasing manager.
Right. Okay. So as I look at it, I see it adding more bureaucracy. We've got just right around 0.1% of the purchases that have come through this. 0.1%. It doesn't say that the commission's not involved at all. The commission still has to approve every contract that is signed.
If it were less than the amount that required a written contract, then the commissioners would not be involved.
Right. Right, and I think as we're looking, I mean, if we looked at the three exceptions, this is how I look at it with the three exceptions. Exception number one, no particular order, but just the one would be the purview of the purchasing manager. We have hired a professional purchasing manager. I don't see anything in our history that shows us that he's not doing his job well. It's less than 0.1%. Every single one of those exceptions has come under scrutiny. Every one of them has passed. I don't see any reason to undermine that. I think that's the purpose of hiring a professional to do it. Number two, under elections, we have a duly elected clerk who's over that, not to mention election professionals. There's a reason it's called out in state law because oftentimes things have to be done quickly. Plus, we don't always want the low-cost bid. It makes sense. I don't see any reason for us to not do it. And then the third one was the county fair. And if I think that if we, in the years past, we've contracted out the county fair to a third entity, and we haven't done this for every purchase they've done. And I think things have gone well. I personally, as a commissioner, don't want to micromanage the other departments. I don't want to have to approve everything. I would rather have a professional who has a history, a stellar history of doing so judiciously. I would rather trust it to them. And then I don't think that I have a right to override another duly elected official in their duties, particularly when it comes to areas of expertise. We as commissioners are certainly not experts in everything. And so where I see in concept, I could see it would make sense. In practicality, I think it adds bureaucracy and unnecessary steps that I feel comfortable right now. Like if we had a history, if we could show that the exceptions had been overused, or if we had any reason to question Robert's judgment, then I could see that. But I don't see any history, I don't see any reason, and I don't want to add more bureaucracy. I like efficient government, I like things that run well. And I think that we as commissioners have plenty of oversight when we set the budget and when we approve contracts.
Robert,
I appreciate that. There's a couple things in there, though. The commission is solely responsible. I mean, our duties are purchasing, and so that is what we do, and we're responsible for that. So it's not one that I take lightly or advocate just because. We have professionals because we have professionals in all different levels of it. And it's not a knock or looking at an efficiency. I mean, whenever we sit down and look at the fraud triangle, opportunity is always the biggest one. It's always the one that we can't control. And so this is not a knock on anybody that's professional or not professional. This is just an added layer of transparency in the process. That's what it is, because it would have to come to a commission level for us to go through it. And if we're going through the proper role and the proper route of making sure and doing this, it does allow for that transparency to be increased. Is there an efficiency component to it? Maybe, if we're at the tail end and we haven't planned or prepared for it. But if we're months and months ahead and now we're going through this process, there's no efficiency, there's no deficiency in it. And
I would argue that those
increase.
things happen if we have months and months to plan. I mean, I don't foresee anybody, I don't think that Commissioner Sakovic and his policy advisor, I don't think that they purposefully waited till the last minute to do things. I think that they did the best they could. I think in elections, when you set a budget, and heaven knows Utah County's budget is less per voter than any comparable county in the nation, when you give the elections division a budget and that budget is $2.25 per voter per election when the national average is $9 per voter per election, they're getting bids on everything they possibly can because they're going to get things as cheaply as they possibly can because they don't have the money to do it otherwise. The only time the exception comes into play is when we're dealing with expertise that I don't think we should claim to have. I think that the professionals have that, or if it's the last minute. And if it's the last minute, are we going to have time to bring that up?
And we do have emergency, rules in which we can bring things up. We do ratifications all the time. And so, again, I'm just, and believe me, I bring this up for conversation more than anything else, because I think that it's important when we're changing things like this. And it is an add to. It's not keeping it the same as it was. This is an add to. Then it's important for us to have a conversation comprehensive on all areas of it. And this is, for me, this is a transparency one, not necessarily just on the elections, because I also put in there the best interests of the county, and also when it comes to entertainment, because there are times in the past when entertainment, we have engaged in entertainment and wound up losing a lot of money. And you wind up going, well, how'd that happen? Well, maybe we should have had more discussion at the beginning of this to see where we were at before we move forward.
On this past year, I think, I'm trying to remember when we were authorized to begin the county fair preparations. I think it was middle of February last year or something like that.
Yeah.
And by the time we met with the Spanish Fork Fairgrounds to make some dates and times and kind of plan ahead, and then it was after that, sometime in early March, we gathered an initial group of people to be a part of this committee, a bunch of volunteers. And so we only had a short window to do this, and as a result, we ran into Robert's rules. We kept running into purchasing issues, and so we had to go back. And several of us were working extremely late hours, well past midnight, to get these things resolved. And so I don't have a cogent history that I can say, yeah, I relate to what this Part B is, or Agenda 21 is trying to get through, because the window of experience is very narrow for me. But I'm also keenly aware that if we had delayed too much, we would have lost some key entertainment pieces. And that was a crux of this whole
Sure.
fair. And so I was concerned about that. And if we were to stop and say, and go back to the commission meeting for a review, we may have lost some days and opportunity to do a contract.
So I get that, and again, this is a conversation piece, and if there's support to move, let's put it this way, I'm willing to vote for what we are willing to do. If we're only willing to go to a certain threshold, I'm fine with that. I wanted to have this conversation to say, is there willingness to go even further than that?
I think it's a great conversation opener. I think we've had on our list as a county, at least since I've been here in 2019, that we have some areas in our purchasing code, not just this section, but the code in general. And you and I have talked about this before, both when I was the auditor and, with me as a commissioner. There are some areas that our flow chart, if you will, our process and the way things go just don't quite make sense. That the system that was created about 20 years ago, and the purchasing policies haven't been reviewed in their holistic form in many decades. Maybe this is a good opportunity. Maybe it's not just, maybe we don't necessarily pass this, but we use this as a catalyst and an opportunity to say, hey, let's bump that to the top of the list of, I know we're recodifying a lot of our code. I think we received an email from County Attorney Ben Stanley a little while ago saying, hey, are there any areas of the code that you have suggestions? It's a great opportunity to maybe we bump that to the top of the list, work with Robert and the purchasing professionals, look at what we've noticed, you and your 7-8 years as a commissioner, me and my time as an auditor and a commissioner, and maybe this is a good opportunity to open that up and say, are there better ways to do this?
Sure.
I appreciate the opening of the conversation. I think that will provide some window of opportunity to look at where we could improve past performances.
With that, I'll make a motion to strike item number 21, but knowing that means we're going to open this conversation and let's look at this holistically, because I think there's absolutely some improvements that could be made for line of sight for commissioners as well as everybody else in the county for efficiency purposes. And then approve item number 22. And then let's have a discussion, Robert, moving forward about looking at and working with the county attorney's office to review our purchasing policies and see if we can find best practices, better ways, and refine that process.
That's actually been on my to-do list for a while now to really revamp and update our purchasing code. That's one thing I hope to do in the coming year.
Well, and this is the perfect catalyst. Thank you, Commissioner Lee. So with that, I'll make that motion to strike item number 21 and approve item number 22.
And seeing where that support is, I'll second that.
Okay. And as a note, 22 supersedes Agenda 20. It was moved from Part 3 to Part 5. So for the public's information, so all in favor to those two motions, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it's 3-0 then.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. Congratulations.
You made it through your first meeting. We're headed into closed session.
Don't tell me it's over already.
No, that was the last agenda item on the regular agenda. We move into closed meetings now.
We need another
You
hour.
need public comment.
We need,
Yeah.
it's true, another hour.
Do we have anyone for,
All right.
is Ralph moving forward for public comment? No, oh darn, I was gonna get,
Alice, are there anyone online that wants to make, is there anyone online that would like to make a comment? Or Maureen? One person, please.
Okay, we have Robert Stevens. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute and proceed.
Hi, Happy New Year, everybody. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear you
Can
fine.
you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, I have an issue that I'd like to bring to your attention. If the assessor removes a parcel from Greenbelt, when that happens, they are charged 5 years of rollback of taxes on the property. But in some situations, like in ours, it's gone into litigation. Ours has been in litigation now for 2 years. A final date in court hasn't been set. But if we sell a parcel now, we must pay 7 years of rollback taxes. And so help me understand, is the county's policy that even though a matter hasn't been resolved, the citizen is treated as if they're guilty? Or is this just perhaps an oversight? When a buyer purchases a parcel, they specify in the contract if they or the seller will pay rollback taxes. In most situations, the buyer wants us to pay rollback taxes, but given a choice, we'd of course rather pay 5 years of rollback taxes than 7 years. And then every year since the litigation started in 2019, we submit information about when the forage was harvested and the number of bales of hay that was hauled away and so forth. So I don't know if you want me to write up something like that and send it to you personally, but I think this needs to be addressed because we've gone in Master County and said, look, while this thing's in litigation, we at least like to pay our taxes on the property, and we're not allowed. So if it goes on for 3 more years, it means that if we sell a parcel, whether it's been, a ruling has been in our favor or not, we have to pay all those years of rollback taxes, which maybe 10 years of rollback taxes. Do you understand what I'm talking about here?
Yes, I understand. I appreciate that, Robert. During this public comment phase, we can't give responses, but we certainly can hear your requests anyway.
Oh, okay. Okay, secondly, you talk about transparency and what you could do. It would be great if you could allocate some funds for an online search of FAA land classifications so I can look up any parcel in the county that is under the Farmland Assessment Act and I can see what its land classification is. This is public information. Salt Lake City has such a search. It's free, it's online, it's available. And then third, it would be really great to have an interactive map. And so it would be very, very easy to see how the lands are classified around any parcel. To discover how the parcels are classified around our parcels, I had to do a grammar request. And I think it should be more open, transparent. So I'd like to request that you consider allocating some funds so an interactive map is created. I know even Salt Lake City is working on software to upgrade their system.
Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Alice, are there any others on phone or Zoom? That's it. Any here present? Please come up and identify yourself, your name and where you're from.
So my name is Christy Henshaw. I'm from Highland. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you guys opening up this conversation about purchasing. I had a couple of thoughts about it. I've run events in the past for a different career in another lifetime that I had, and so I understand the fair and how things come up at the last minute. That always happens, and so having red tape in the way when you have an event coming makes sense to not have that. I did have a little bit of heartburn when we were talking about elections, just because it seems that elections are planned. And so it seemed like if they're on the books already, a lot of the extenuating circumstances could already be foreseen. They could be eliminated. They wouldn't be extenuating circumstances because you know what's coming. So unless you had something like last minute huge increase of people moving in or something like this would be stuff that you would already see coming, down the pipe. So I saw them as very different because one is like a moving, breathing thing in the moment, and the other is very much set and is on the calendar, and we know what's coming. So yeah, I had a little bit of heartburn that there was, election issues there. You're not wrong. People are concerned about that right now, and they're looking at processes. And so I think that what could be viewed as bureaucracy to others may view it as safeguards. And so especially when we're talking about perception currently. And so it would be looked at as if elections and purchasing like that had more oversight or some extra safeguards. I think that would be a positive in the public's view right now. And so I just want to say thank you for opening that discussion, and look forward to seeing where it goes. So appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comment? And with that, I think we move into our closed session. Alice, thank you.
Goodbye.